Today we jump into a new series that we've entitled Swag. It's actually a series that we've adapted from New Spring Church in South Carolina. Today I'm going to follow closely some of the words of Perry Noble, just his outline. But before we jump into that, let me just tell you what I think is real exciting news for LCBC. Over the last number of months, even probably back longer than a year or so, the leadership of LCBC has kind of been watching an area around LCBC where we tend to have more and more people driving to an LCBC campus. And we decided it's time to go ahead and launch a campus in that area. And so in the Reading area, we have about 400 to 500 people that come to LCBC now, and we're saying it's time to go ahead and launch a campus there. So kind of some fun stuff as we think about the future for LCBC. So the plan is to say, let's go for it, and let's do this in January. And so still a lot of details to be worked out. And so hopefully in the next few weeks, we can kind of tell you location of where we hope to start, leadership team and things like that. But I would just say in the meantime, be praying for the people that live in the Reading area. People that maybe have no interest in God whatsoever, no knowledge at all about LCBC, could care less about LCBC, but they're going to be invited sometime in the next 6 months to attend a gathering at LCBC. And just be praying that they'll be open enough to say, okay, we'll come, we'll check it out. And hopefully as they come and check it out, like us, they too can hopefully become lives that have been changed by Christ. So just some cool stuff that's happening over the next number of months around LCBC. So let me ask you, have you ever been, how many of you, and I'm not looking for a show of hands, but how many of you have ever been to a Chuck E. Cheese? I mean, you know what I'm talking about, Chuck E. Cheese. I actually think there's one around all of our campuses except for Columbia Montour, and you folks don't know what you're missing in Columbia Montour, that you don't have a Chuck E. Cheese. I actually think there's one in the Reading area as well. And when our kids were young, we used to go often to Chuck E. Cheese. And when you go to Chuck E. Cheese, you don't go there for the food, you don't go there for the pizza. And I know when I say that, I've got to be careful because somebody is going to work for Chuck E. Cheese. You're going to own the franchise here locally. And you're going to go, hey, watch what you say about Chuck E. Cheese. And I would just say if that's true about you, then maybe the one thing you need to get out of church today is make better pizza. I mean, that might be it for you today. Just figure that out. But I just remember when we would go to Chuck E. Cheese, again, for us, it was to hug Chucky the giant mouse, and then it was kind of to play the games where you would get the tickets. And you got the tickets from playing games like skeet ball or whack-a-mole. And I mean, I remember watching parents playing whack-a-mole, and you think, man, you need to calm down a little bit. You're getting a little too intense with this. And they would say, it doesn't say tap-a-mole, it says whack-a-mole, and that's all we're doing. And so one of my memories of Chuck E. Cheese was back when we lived in Texas, and Ruth would work on Thursdays for a dentist, and so I would take the day off, and I would actually stay home and watch Justin, our son, who was anywhere from 0 up to 3 or 4 years old at that time. This is actually a picture of Justin when he was in that 3 to 4 year old range, and I would stay home with him, and most of the time it was a good experience. We enjoyed being home together most of the time, and on one particular day, I decided that we needed to get out of the house. We needed to do something different. And so I decided I would take Justin to Chuck E. Cheese on my own. And again, Justin was probably about 3 at the time. And so Justin and I show up at Chuck E. Cheese for lunch on this Thursday. And it's me and Justin and about 50 other moms and all their children, probably 200 kids. And I'm the only dad there, it felt like, in the entire place. And it began as just a real fun time. I mean, Justin is playing games and he's getting tickets. And I mean, that's what it's all about. And then we decided to go over to the ball cage. And the ball cage is this kind of netted room with just thousands and thousands of colored plastic balls, and the kids kind of get in there and they climb around and they jump and they throw things, and for them it's just kind of great fun. And reached the point where I figured Justin had been in the cage kind of long enough, it was time to move on and maybe even go home. And so I start telling Justin, okay, it's time to come on out and time to head on home. And he's in this cage, and again, if you've been there, you know the cage is this kind of tiny little opening. It's really for only little kids. And so he's about 10 feet into the cage, and he just smiles at me. And he's not going anywhere. And so all of a sudden, the weight of the world is on my shoulders because I'm the one dad there. And I'm representing all dads, all men at that point. And all these moms, I figure, are watching. What is this dad going to do? And I mean, he's 3. I'm telling him what to do. He ought to do what I'm telling him to do. But he's not. He's just sitting there smiling at me. And so anyway, I ended up reaching into the cage and almost falling in. If I'd fallen in, I never would have gotten out. It's just this tiny little opening, and I'm swinging, trying to get him. And finally, I give up, and he comes out eventually. And I say, I will never go back to Chuck E. Cheese again. But We went back, but I said, I'll only go back if Ruth is with me. If Ruth is with me, then I'm okay going to Chuck E. Cheese. So we go back, and as we go back, the kids are playing the games, and they're getting their tickets. I mean, that's what Chuck E. Cheese is all about, and as parents, we like them to get tickets because they're busy and they're occupied, and so they're getting their tickets. And so it doesn't take long, and they're accumulating hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of tickets. And the whole thing is get as many tickets as you can, because at the end of your time at Chuck E. Cheese, you get to go up to the counter. And when you go up to the counter, you get to put your tickets on the counter, and you get to get a prize. Now, you go up to the counter, and when you've got this many tickets, you think, I'm gonna get something good. I mean, maybe it's an actual jet plane, maybe it's a pony to take home, it's gonna be something good. And so I remember going up to the counter, plopping the tickets on the counter, and the person kind of looks at us, and they pull out from behind the counter this little plastic bouncy ball, and they go, here, this is what you get. Or if you'd rather, you can have this sun visor, this plastic visor, and you kind of look and you go, is that it? Is that all we get for all of these tickets? And that's kind of the way it works at Chuck E. Cheese. Now let's say that I decided, okay, it's been a long time, many, many years since I've been to Chuck E. Cheese. I'm gonna go back and see if anything has changed. So I go back after the gathering today, and I invest all kinds of time and all kinds of money, all kinds of energy getting tickets, and I come up with another big, big pile of Chuck E. Cheese tickets. And I head up to the counter, and again, I'm thinking it's gonna be something good, but you know what? Some things never change, and they say, it's actually, you get the bouncy ball, or you get the plastic sun visor. And I say, you know what? I'm not gonna do that this time. I've invested way too much time, way too much energy in these tickets. I'm gonna see if I can't get something better. And so I say, no, I don't want the bouncy ball, and I don't want the sun visor. So I go out to the car, and I take my tickets with me, and I leave. And as I'm driving home, I actually happen to pass a Chevy dealership. And as I go by the Chevy dealership, I happen to see out of the corner of my eye the new Z28s, the Camaros, and I think that's a good looking car. It reminds me of my high school days, and it's not a Mustang, it's much better than that. And so I see the Z28 there, and I decide that I'm gonna stop in. And so I pull into the dealership, and I go in, and I say, you know, that Z28 out there, I would like that car. And we don't need to haggle about the price. You just said it, you name it, I'm fine. And so we kind of work everything out, and they say, sir, how would you like to pay for it? And I go, tickets. I've got tickets. So I go back and I get in my car, and I'm driving home because they didn't like the idea of the tickets. And I'm thinking there's gotta be something that I can get from these tickets. And so, again, out of the corner of my eye, I spy a Dunkin' Donuts, and I like Dunkin' Donuts, and I know you have Dunkin' Donuts in Columbia, Montour, because I've been to your Dunkin' Donuts there. And so I go into Dunkin' Donuts, and I'm not a coffee drinker. I don't like the taste of coffee, but I do like their chais at Dunkin' Donuts. And so I say, you know what? Give me a large chai. I'm going for the big one. I'm going for the large chai. Give me a large chai. And so they begin to get it all ready, and they say, sir, how would you like to pay for it? And tickets. I've got tickets. I'm walking back out to my car with nothing in my hands other than tickets, and it dawns on me, these tickets really have no value. Very little value at Chuck E. Cheese, no value anyplace else. Doesn't matter how much time or energy I invested in them, these tickets have no value whatsoever. They say, David, thanks for telling us a story. Now we're hungry for good pizza and Dunkin' Donuts, chai, or coffee, and what's with the tickets? Well, when it comes to the religious world, and when it comes to most people in church, most people have the idea that it's all about tickets. That it's all about tickets, and if I can get enough tickets in life, then things are gonna be okay down the road, maybe even on into eternity. And the idea of tickets isn't from Chuck E. Cheese. You don't go to Chuck E. Cheese to get the tickets. You get the tickets by just doing good things. And if you do enough good things with your life, then you're gonna end up with a lot of tickets. And so most people have this idea, this sense that it's all about having lots and lots of tickets. And what's interesting is God says it's not at all about the tickets. As a matter of fact, God has some real strong thoughts about the tickets that we think we're earning that are gonna take care of us for eternity, they're gonna take care of us in our lives, and somehow make things good for us. And so let me ask you to grab a Bible, open it up to Isaiah chapter 64, and it's page, what page is it? 567 in the Bibles there at your seats. Isaiah chapter 64. And I just want you to see what God actually has to say about our tickets. Isaiah 64, page 567. Even if you don't typically grab a Bible and open it up, I'd love for you to do that because, again, I think it's important you see what God says, not really what I'm saying. Let me just say right up front that what he actually says here is the words of a man named Isaiah. Isaiah was writing to a group of people who thought it was all about tickets. In their minds, if they had enough tickets, life was going to be good. In their minds, their future, their eternity was going to be good if they had the right number of tickets. And the way they got their tickets were by doing good things. And Isaiah uses some language, for some people could even be offensive language, of saying, here's what God actually thinks about your particular tickets. And so Isaiah chapter 64, this is what Isaiah says. He says, for since the world began, no ear has heard, no eye has seen a God like you who works for those who wait for him. In other words, he starts out and he's saying, God, there is nobody like you. Let's just get that out on the table. No one in the universe, nothing like you at all, God. Let's just acknowledge that, Isaiah says. Then he goes on. He says, you welcome those who gladly do good, who follow godly ways, but you have been very angry with us, for we are not godly. He says, we're a bunch of people that we stumble a lot. We make a lot of mistakes, and we stumble, and we fall, and we sin, and we struggle with life. You've kind of been upset with us, God. We are constant sinners. How can people like us be saved? How can we take care of our eternity? How can we take care of our future? We're all infected and impure with sin. When we display our righteous deeds, they're nothing but filthy rags. He says, we're trying hard, God. We're doing things to earn tickets. We're doing good things to earn tickets. And then he says this about the tickets. He says, to God, they're nothing but filthy rags. He says, that's what God sees when he looks at our tickets. Now, scholars have a couple different interpretations for what it means, this idea of filthy tickets. Because when you really understand what Isaiah is saying about God's feelings about these filthy rags, then all of a sudden it almost becomes offensive. One group of scholars says, you know what those rags are about? They're about the rags that you would put on the skin of people with leprosy, where it's just oozing and blood and it's just wet and moist. And so you'd wrap the arm or the body part around this leprous part of the body, and then you take those rags off and they're just soaked and saturated with just stuff. And you go, ooh, I want nothing to do with that. Another group of scholars says, no, it's not actually about that. What he's talking about is a woman's menstrual rags or menstrual cloth. And you go, oh, I don't want that either. And Isaiah's saying, look, you just need to understand the things that you think you're doing to kind of take care of your future, the good deeds that you're doing, God looks at them and he says, filthy rags. And understand, he's not talking about the bad things you do are filthy rags. It's the good things. On our best days, he says, our best days, God calls our good deeds filthy rags. So it's not when you're living with somebody you shouldn't be living with. It's not when you're watching porn. It's not when you're doing drugs. And he says, those things are filthy rags. He says, no, on your best day, when you actually get up in the morning and you have a quiet time and you actually spend time talking to me and you're nice to the people around you and you're compassionate to people. He says, those are the things. To me, God says, those are like filthy rags. I hear that and I go, wow, okay. So if that's the case, all the good things that I think I'm about, if those are just filthy rags to God, then what is it? How can I make sure somehow that I'm in good standing with God as I move into the future? How can I make sure that my future is secure if it's not about tickets, if it's not about good things, doing good things, then what is it actually about? And so Jesus speaks into this. Jesus speaks to a bunch of people that thought it was about tickets. They thought it was about doing good things. And this is what Jesus actually said. Jesus is speaking. He says, for God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only son. That's Jesus. He's speaking about himself. So that everyone who believes in him, in Jesus, will not perish, but have eternal life. Jesus says it's not about the tickets. Jesus says it's for everyone. God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only son, that whoever actually believes in Jesus. Since it's not about the tickets, it's about believing in Jesus, will not perish but have eternal life. And notice it's not believes, comma, and has a lot of tickets. He doesn't say anyone who believes in me and does a lot of good things. Anyone who believes in me and cleans up their life. Anyone who believes in me and. There's no buts. There's no comma there. There's no addendum that adds things. It's just anyone who believes in me. Jesus says, your eternity is secure. Your future is going to look good. And there's a man named Paul who actually spoke about the same kind of thing. This is the way he actually talks about it. He says, anyone who belongs to Christ become a new person. The old life is gone, a new life has begun. If you belong to Christ, he says, and you're a new person, you're changed. And so when we break it down, anyone, it's available to anybody. Nobody's excluded. Nobody's held out. Anyone can step in. Anyone who belongs, he says, to Christ. The idea of belonging to Christ is anyone who believes in Jesus, belongs to Jesus, has become, all of a sudden, you are a new person. You're changed. You're different. And bottom line, that's kind of who we are at LCBC. We're just a bunch of people whose lives are in the process of being changed by Jesus Christ. Paul says it's all because we believe in Jesus. Same guy, Paul, actually says it this way in Ephesians chapter 2. He said, God saved you by his grace when you believed. No comma, period, done. When you believed, and you can't take credit for this, it's a gift from God. He goes on and he says, salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it. And so when you look at what Paul is saying, he says, look, we've been saved by grace. Grace is unmerited favor. Grace is something that you and I don't deserve. We didn't do anything to earn it. It's just God and this incredible kindness, incredible love. You and I were saved by grace when you believe. There's action on our part. And it's when we made the decision to believe Jesus, and he says, you can't take credit for it. You can't. Because it's a gift from God. And then he talks about the fact that it's not a reward. It's not saying, okay, you've got lots of tickets, and because you've got lots of tickets you earn for doing good things, because you've got lots of tickets, he says it's not a reward for these things. It has nothing to do with it. Because he says, if you were, you would boast about it. You'd brag about it. You'd say, look at all the tickets I have. I must be something. I've got a lot of tickets here. And he says, no, you don't understand. It's not about your tickets. It's all about Jesus and all about the fact that you believe in Jesus. And some of us actually, all of our lives, have been under the impression that it's about the tickets. And some of us have been told all our lives it's about the tickets. You just need to be good. You need to do some good things in life. Hopefully you do more good things than bad things, and you've got enough tickets, and it's all going to end up okay for you. And so some of us, we just have the feeling that it's all about the tickets, and you know how the tickets work. I mean, you know how the tickets work. You know how okay, you're here at church today. And so some of you have the idea that because you're here at church today, you ought to get a couple tickets. I mean, come on, I spent several hours at church. That's worth a few tickets. And so you figure you picked up some church tickets by being at church today. Some of you might have even prayed a few times before you went to bed this week. That's got to be worth a few more tickets. Maybe for you, this week, the entire week, you only cursed and swore about 10 times. For you, that's amazing. That's got to be worth some tickets. I mean, come on. I really was going for it this week. All your friends were going to see that R-rated movie. You decided, no, I'm not going to go see that. Whoa, girl, you deserve some tickets for that. And we just kind of think, okay, if I live my life right, I'm going to get a lot of tickets. And God says, filthy rags. That's all they are to me. They're actually almost offensive to him. Filthy rags. He says, they're not going to take care of anything. And Jesus and Paul say, you know what? It's all about Jesus. That's it. It's only about Jesus. Now, let me kind of show it to you this way. This is actually a circle I'm going to call the circle of grace. And in the very middle of the circle is Jesus. And God invites us into the circle of grace. And we draw a couple of people here. This is a person, and this dot will represent another person. And with the circle of grace, you've got these people, everybody's outside of the circle of grace initially. And this one person, they're somebody that they're running from God, very, very far from God, have no interest in God whatsoever. And if you would actually kind of talk to them, if there's a commandment, if there's a rule they haven't broken, then tell them and they'll be happy to break it. I mean, that's just kind of, I'll just do whatever I need to kind of go against the system, constantly breaking the rules and just far from God. This is a person that actually knows a lot about God. Grew up going to church, knows a lot about God, knows a lot about the Bible. You'd look at this person and say, man, they're pretty knowledgeable. They must be a good person. What's interesting is both of these people are outside of the circle of grace. And Jesus calls, and he kind of would love to pull each of those individuals inside the circle of grace. And what's interesting is the circle of grace and the amount of grace there, it's available to everyone. Nobody's excluded, nobody's left out. There's grace available to every single person, and whether it's somebody running from God, whether it's somebody that's been close to God. And so let's say that this person decides, you know what, I'm gonna step inside this circle of grace. I don't know what's going on in my life. I know that my life is a mess. I know I've got a lot of issues, and so they decide to accept the grace that's handed out to them, and they believe in Jesus, and they step inside the circle of grace, and they're not far inside the circle of grace. They're pretty close to the edge. I don't know if you've been around people much that just kind of just stepped in to the circle of grace. And we've got a lot of people like that around LCBC. I have a friend that's a pastor. His name is Larry. And he actually calls people that have just stepped inside the circle of grace, he calls them hell of a talk guys. And the reason why he calls them that is he says sometimes when he's teaching and he's finished teaching and he goes out to the atrium, goes out to the lobby, then somebody will come up to him and say, Pastor, that was a hell of a talk. And he says, when somebody says that to him, he says, I know that they're not very far in to the circle of grace. They haven't been in very long, and yet they're inside the circle of grace. And what's interesting is once we're inside the circle of grace, the same amount of grace is available to everyone. It's available to anyone outside the grace, and once we're in, it doesn't matter background, it doesn't matter experiences, the same amount of grace is available to everyone. And so let's say this person decides, you know what, I'm gonna take another step closer to Jesus. And so they figure out what that next step is, and they take another step, and then they take another step closer to Jesus. And what's interesting is they move closer to Jesus, and maybe this was you a year ago, but now you'd say, you know what, I've taken some steps. I've moved closer to Jesus. And the interesting thing to me is the closer you get to Jesus, all of a sudden you begin to realize, as you look at Jesus, he becomes more and more irresistible to you, where you just go, man, Jesus is amazing. And you find him more and more irresistible, and you're more excited about moving closer to him. But sometimes, the longer we're within this circle of grace, an interesting thing begins to happen to us. And if we're not careful, it happens to all of us. And it really happens to those of us that have been inside the circle of grace for a while. And what happens is we get deeper into the circle of grace, and if we're not careful, we forget how we got into the circle in the first place. And we begin to think, you know what, maybe it really was about the tickets. Because look at me, I'm becoming a pretty good person. Must be about being good, must be because I had a lot of tickets. And so we become ticket carriers again and thinking it's all about tickets. And when you become a ticket carrier again, a couple of interesting things actually begin to happen. And as I describe these things, maybe it's happened to you, maybe you're there right now. One of the things that happens as you become a ticket carrier and you're inside this circle of grace is all of a sudden, instead of focusing on Jesus, you kind of turn around and you begin to focus on people behind you. People out here, people that are further away from Jesus, and you begin to compare yourself to them. And you think, well, I don't do some of the things that they do. Definitely don't do the things that they do. And all of a sudden, you're comparing yourself to other people, and you're thinking, man, compared to them, I'm doing pretty good. I've got a lot of tickets. And what's interesting is, as long as you keep focusing this way, then yeah, it looks like you're doing pretty good. But if you would turn back and look at Jesus, because that's what it's all about. It's not about looking at anybody else. It's about looking at Jesus. And as long as you focus on Jesus, when you begin to focus on Jesus, you go, oh, man, I shouldn't even be here. I mean, with the life that I live, I shouldn't have even been invited into the circle of grace. That's why it's grace. It's unmerited. I can't boast about it. I can't brag about it. Somehow, because of Jesus and what Jesus has done for me on the cross, I'm allowed to be inside this circle. And you're just kind of blown away. But when you're not looking at Jesus, you begin to compare yourself to everybody else. The second thing that we do, when we've been inside the circle of grace for a while, as we compare ourselves to other people, then all of a sudden we begin to condemn the other people. And we say, I can't believe you're doing the things that you're doing. Because look at me, I'm way in here, I've got lots of tickets, and how can you be doing those things and claim to be a follower of Jesus? So we begin to condemn people, and especially people outside of the circle of grace. And so this person looks at this person and says, you know what, you ought to act like Jesus. And we condemn them for not acting like Jesus when there's no way they can act like Jesus. They're not even in the circle of grace. They're not even trying to be like Jesus. And so we begin to condemn people outside of the circle of grace. And so then we say things like this. We say, you know what? You need Jesus. You need Jesus to be a part of your life. And from what I can tell, it looks like you're living with somebody, that you're not married to. And so what you need to do is you need Jesus, but first you need to clean up your life. You need to stop living with that person, and then you can come inside the circle of grace. What's interesting is Jesus says, whoa, you just added something. Jesus says, you know what? They don't have to stop living with that person to step inside the circle of grace. All they have to do is believe. You believe, and you step inside the circle of grace. Or we look at another person over here, and we say, this person, they need Jesus really bad. And we'll say things like that. Ooh, they really need Jesus. And the reason why this person needs Jesus is they're constantly telling lies. They're just a cheat. They're a liar. And so I say, you need Jesus. But before you come to Jesus, you just need to stop all the lying. You need to clean up your life and stop lying. And Jesus goes, wait a minute. That's not it at all. All they need to do is believe, and then they can step inside the circle of grace. Or we look at this person over here and we go, you know what, you really need Jesus, but you're living this gay lifestyle, and so you stop being gay, then you can step inside the circle of grace. And what's interesting is Jesus didn't say, believe and be heterosexual, and then you can be saved. He said, believe, just believe, and you can step in the circle of grace. Or another person, and they're just constantly doing drugs, and you go, man, you just need to cut the drugs out. You need Jesus, but you need to stop the drugs. Stop the drugs, and you can step into the circle of grace. And Jesus says, oh, wait a minute. That's not what I said. Jesus said, you believe in me, and then you can step inside the circle of grace. And don't misunderstand what Jesus is saying or what I'm saying. Jesus isn't affirming all of these lifestyles. He's just saying, you don't have to clean everything up to step inside the circle. All you have to do is believe in me. And the interesting thing is, what I know from my experience, what I know from watching you, what I know from what God says is when we step inside the circle of grace, Jesus in his time, Jesus in his way, Jesus will begin to make changes to us as we begin to take steps closer and closer and closer to him. And so it's not our place to be saying, look, you need to change what you're doing and then step into the circle. Jesus says, trust me, believe me. Believe in me, you step inside the circle of grace, and then Jesus is the one that changes lives. It's lives changed by Christ. And Jesus says, look, you step into the circle of grace at the right time, the right way. The things that you need to do, the things that I need to do to shape you, that will begin to happen. Now, can I tell you what I hope for us as a church? See, churches are notorious at saying, you need to stop this behavior. You need to stop this behavior and then come to Jesus. Stop this behavior. And we spend a lot of time telling people what they need to stop doing, condemning, because we're not looking at Jesus. We're looking at those people and go, ooh, you're pretty bad. You need to stop doing that. My hope for us as a church is that we're not a church that's known for saying, stop it. But instead, we're a church that's known for saying, follow Jesus. Step inside the circle. Step inside the circle, wherever you are, whatever's going on in your life. And you say, David, you don't know what's going on in their life. You're right, I don't. Jesus says it doesn't matter what's going on in their life. Jesus says, believe in me. Step inside the circle. And then he says, then I'll do whatever needs to happen after that. It's not our job to try to change everybody's life. Our job is to introduce people to Jesus because Jesus is the one that changes lives. Now, another thing that happens once we step inside the circle is when you begin to take steps to follow Jesus. It's a brand new thing. You haven't done it before. And so it's a brand new thing. It's like learning to walk all over again. And so what I can guarantee you that's going to happen when you're learning to walk and follow Jesus is you're going to fall. It's going to happen. That's just kind of a natural thing. When your babies first started to walk, they took a couple steps and then they would fall down. And did you say, you idiot, I can't believe you fell? Whose child are you anyway? You didn't say that to your kids as they were learning to walk. If you did, you're a cruel parent, then you would never say that kind of thing. Instead, you kind of ran over, picked them up, probably gave them a kiss on the cheek, hugged them, patted them on the behind, and said, okay, let's start walking again. Try it again, come on. And when somebody begins to follow Jesus, they're going to take steps, and they're going to figure out the next step, and they're going to fall. It's a guarantee it's going to happen. They're going to fall. And our job isn't to say, okay, let's go out and condemn this person that just fell. Our job is to go over and give them a hug and a pat and say, you know what, let's keep going. Get up, keep going. Let's take another step as we're all moving towards Jesus. And so what you need to understand is it's not about the tickets. We think, get some tickets then you can come to Jesus. Jesus says it's not about the tickets. You can't get enough tickets to come to me. A couple of things that happen once you step inside the circle, things that are life-changing for you. One of the first things that happens is all of a sudden you find yourself, you don't have to sin anymore. The thing that's always drug you down, the thing that's your constant kind of downfall, the thing that you're addicted to, the thing that just is this compulsion for you that you always do and you always stumble. All of a sudden, when you step inside this circle of grace, you have the freedom to not be a slave to sin anymore. And you'll still fall and you'll still sin. It'll happen. But you don't have to continue to fall because God's power is there. Jesus is there with you. His Spirit is there with you. He says, you can be free from the sins that have pulled you down before. You don't have to sin anymore. Second thing that happens is you step inside this circle of grace. Your past, present, future sins, they're forgiven. All of my sins, those that I've committed in the past that I may be committing now, that I'm committing in the future, all of those have been forgiven. It's an amazing thing. That's why it's called the circle of grace. You step in and you don't deserve that at all. And you didn't earn enough tickets to get to that position. It's just God's grace. That's why he calls it grace, unmerited favor. And you step in that circle of grace and your sins are forgiven because of what Jesus has done. Not you, but because of what Jesus has done on the cross. And then the third thing that happens is you and I, we become sons and daughters of God when we step into the circle of grace. And I don't know if I can actually say which ones are my favorite things to happen, but I think this is one of the coolest things around. To think that I could actually be a son of God, to think that you could actually be a daughter of God, it's just a mind-blowing thing to me because I know my life and I know, and I kind of look and I go, there's no way that I should be a son of God. There's no way I could be. And yet it's because of God's grace, his unmerited favor, and I become a son of God. And see what's interesting, I showed you the picture of Justin a little earlier, Justin, my son. And what's interesting with Justin is when he became my son, when he was born and became my son, he becomes my son no matter what happens. And so Justin, could be my smart son. If he's my smart son, he's still my smart son. Justin could be my silly son, and if he's my silly son, he's still my silly son. Justin could be my rich son, and if he is, he's my rich son. He could be my poor son, and if he is, he's my poor son. And he could be my misbehaving son. If he is, he's still my misbehaving son. And there's nothing that can happen that can take Justin out of this relationship with me where he's no longer my son. He's going to be my son no matter what. And I think one of the coolest things about God is he says, when you and I step into this circle of grace, we become his sons, we become his daughters, whatever happens. And God does not kick sons and daughters out of the family. He doesn't do it. And part of that is we didn't get into the family because we were good people. We have this notion that if we get into the circle, if we get into God's family, then we're going to do some terrible things. And if we do too many terrible things, God's going to kick us out. You know what? That's ticket-carrying mentality. That's thinking, okay, I've got to keep earning tickets while I'm in here. Otherwise, he's going to kick me out of the family. You didn't get in because of your tickets. You didn't get in because you're a great person. You got in because of God's grace. You don't stay in because you're a good person. You stay in because of God's grace. And once a son, always a daughter. God doesn't kick family members out of his family. I just think that's an amazing thing. So here's the deal. Some of us today need to put the tickets down. You've been carrying around these tickets your whole life, and you've been trying to accumulate, and you're worn out, and you're tired, and you've been taught your whole life it's about the tickets. Jesus says it has nothing to do with the tickets. It has everything to do with believing in him. And so for you today, this is the day. Put the tickets down. Believe Jesus. Others of you would say, you know what, I've kind of stepped in here, but if I'm honest, I have been looking back. I've been comparing. I've been condemning. You picked up the tickets again. You're carrying the tickets again. And for us, those that find ourselves in that position, put the tickets down. Put the tickets down, turn back, focus on Jesus. It's about focusing on Jesus and saying, okay. For us as a church, it's saying, man, it really is not. It's not about telling people to stop it. It's about saying, just follow Jesus. Follow Jesus. And so I'll tell you what I want to do is just take a moment and say, okay, let's talk to God. And I'm going to pray. And praying is just talking to God. And so as I talk to God, I want to invite you to talk to God on all of our campuses as well, where in your mind, you talk to him and you say, time to put the tickets down, God. Time to quit condemning people, God. Time to quit comparing myself to other people, God. And time to just begin to focus on Jesus. And if for you, You're saying, okay, I'm going to put the tickets down. I'm going to begin to follow Jesus. There's no sacred words to say. There's no formula. It's just a matter of saying, God, I'm not trusting in my efforts anymore. Not trusting in my abilities anymore. Not trusting in the number of tickets I have. Because if it was any of those things, you could boast about them. And you can't boast about what Jesus has done. And so you talk to God and say, it's Jesus. It's Jesus and only Jesus that I'm choosing to believe and follow. And so I'm going to pray. And as I pray, you talk to him. And make this the day where you say, I'm putting the tickets down. Heavenly Father, God, it is so easy for me to think that it's about the tickets. Because we're always told, need to be good, need to clean up your life. And it's so easy to begin to think it really is all about the tickets. And the fascinating thing is, Jesus says it has nothing to do with the tickets. It's not about tickets at all. It's only about believing in him. And we can't have enough tickets ever to somehow earn our way into the circle of grace. That's why it's called the circle of grace. It's unmerited. It's not something I earned. It's not something I worked for. It's a free gift from you. And so some of us today, God, want to say to you for the very first time, I'm not trusting in my efforts. I'm not trusting in my own abilities. I'm not trusting in the number of tickets I have. I'm trusting in Jesus and Jesus alone. And God, the cool thing is, as we say we're trusting in you alone, we become new lives changed by Jesus. We become your sons, we become your daughters, never to be kicked out of your family. And what a cool thing that is. Great thing is, God, you don't even kick us out of the family when we start comparing ourselves to others. You don't kick us out of the family when we start condemning others. But instead you say, look, just take your eyes off of everybody else and start focusing on me. And so God, some of us, we just need to put our eyes back on you and say we're sorry for condemning, we're sorry for comparing. God, for us as a church, I ask that we would be a church that's constantly pointing to Jesus and saying, follow Jesus. Follow Jesus. Jesus will take care of what needs to be taken care of. Constantly follow Jesus. God, thank you for this amazing gift of grace. We think, how in the world could it be that you would love somebody like me? But you do. So today, God, we say thank you for your love. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.